Good morning, everyone. I hope you're awake after the late-ish night at the Vasa, which was great. Thanks to Martin for setting that up. Well, we have a speaker I guarantee will keep you awake this morning. So I've known her for quite a while. She started out her life as her professional life as a participant in human automation interaction and learned some important lessons. Spent time at Duke University and now is at George Mason University working in that area. Spent time at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, which is the U.S. automotive safety regulator, digging into self-driving vehicle technology and how it fails, and got her eyes even further wide open than they were, probably. Most recently, she's fresh off being on the winning side of a $250 billion with a B dollar lawsuit against Tesla about self-driving car safety. But the highest honor is one she may not even realize. The highest honor was, my wife said, I was at a conference and she wanted to come with me to the session to meet the biggest badass she's ever known, which is a compliment in the US. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce Professor Missy Cummings.
Thank you, Phil. So for those of you who don't know, I think one of the reasons that people think that I'm a badass is because of this, right? So this is how I started my career. I was a military fighter pilot. I flew A-4s and F-18s, took off, landed on carriers, dropped bombs, all of that. Which is to say, once you do this, it is a forever badassery that goes with this. You're a single seat fighter pilot. And so when you meet me and talk to me, that is who I am. And it's funny, as I get older, I really feel like I'm more of a fighter pilot in a mental attitude. So that's the one good thing about aging. Ladies, as you get older, at some point you're going to get to this point you just don't care anymore, and then it's really freeing. So I did that for nearly a decade with the Navy, and then I went back to school, got my PhD, and then started to work on drone technology. It's kind of funny. You're like, oh, that's really cool. That doesn't look as cool with drones, but it's definitely the future. And so I did a lot of work in that area, really the first decade of my career. And then basically, I was doing small drones before people even knew what they were. They started to be commercialized, and I needed to get a new focus area. So then this is the pictures from about 2013 era. And this is me working on a driving simulator. We're actually developing the idea of Tesla's autopilot, basically level 2 driving assist, where the automation's doing most of the driving, but you sort of need to pay attention. And this is a 4-hour simulator drive where I think everybody here can appreciate this, especially from Sweden. At about 2.5 hours, a moose kind of ambles across the road. You can totally avoid it. But as you can see, he hits it, and we let them take into the simulator whatever they would take. And of course, his cell phone comes up, right? So we've known for a very long time, and I'm sorry that Trent Victor isn't here because Google paid for this. Google Waymo, before it became Waymo, was the X. So we've known for a long time that the human interaction piece in automated technology is going to be a problem if you're going to require people to pay attention. But I do think one of the things that people don't know about a lot of the work I've done, remember I told you for the first 10 years, I lived inside of remote operator trailers for drones. With Predator pilots, Reaper pilots, Army Shadow pilots, just hours and hours of watching them do operations inside the remote operations center. And that doesn't seem relevant, maybe, but it actually turns out it's super relevant because what's happening there is now happening not only in self-driving cars, but it just turns out that human supervision is needed in a lot of places for autonomous technology where people aren't really aware that they're needed. So I'm going to get professorial for just a second to kind of teach you. This is how I teach my students to think about when, where, how, why do you need different levels of autonomy. So this is the SRKE framework. I built this off of a Jens Rasmussen, who is a European researcher. So I extended his work, and the idea is that there are 4 levels of reasoning that any agent, human autonomy, must go through to be able to reason through all situations. In the first, when you're first learning to drive, you have to learn to stay between the lines on the road. And you want that process to become automatic. You don't want to have to think about keeping yourself in the center of the lane. When you first drive, you have to think about it. But then it becomes quickly a perceptual cognition task, and you automate it very quickly in your head. Indeed, self-driving cars, L2 cars, they do a really good job as long as they can see the lines, right? And, for you can actually do a pretty good job even if there are no lines. And this is one of the things that we're going to start talking about, is what the human power of reasoning, where do we really bring strong input? Now, after you learn how to do what we call skill-based reasoning, you then graduate to rule-based reasoning. And this is where you see signs, signals, symbols in the world, and you know what to do, that it's going to drive a set of rules that you are then going to execute. Stop sign. You got to start slowing down, come to a full stop, look all ways, and then go. Traffic lights. You know what you're supposed to do at traffic lights. Hand guards. There are sets of rules in every environment that then once you know how to do the skills, then you can really concentrate on the rules. And if you think about it, this is why we send people to flight school, is to learn a lot of this stuff. We really teach in all kinds of transportation schools, we teach skill and rule explicitly. But once you get past rule, and now you're seeing the big curve come up, it's the curve of uncertainty. You need different forms of reasoning as uncertainty grows in the world. Knowledge-based reasoning is judgment under uncertainty. We're starting to have a situation. I may not have perfect information, and I'm going to have to take a guess. In this particular case, I show a occluded stop sign with leaves growing across it. Now, when I flashed up this slide, you instantly knew that was a stop sign, was not any question in your head. Even if the leaves covered like 90%, as long as you could see one tiny little edge, you would know that there's a stop sign there. It turns out this is a self-driving car computer vision nightmare, because they are trained on fully exposed signs. And you could say, okay, well then why aren't they trained on partially occluded signs? It's not that they can't, but these leaves, if you're in the South in America, we have this vine called kudzu. It's everywhere. It starts to grow in March, and then this sign would be completely gone by September. And every year it grows back a slightly different way. And it turns out even leaves growing back a slightly different way can be enough to fool a computer vision system. And I'll show you some examples in a second in the real world. Last but not least, we have expert-based reasoning. This is maximum uncertainty. It's a situation that you have never seen before, that you have never been taught before, and you are going to have to adapt to the world in a way that you have never had to adapt. I love this as a real intersection at some point in America. Somehow, if you got here, you made a mistake. This would be a self-driving car killer. This would definitely cause a self-driving car to brick, because all the rules say you cannot go any which way. Now, I have a four-wheel drive and I have an attitude, which means that I'm constantly getting myself into places where I shouldn't be. I have been in places like this, but what do you do to get out? Once you find yourself and you can't get through there, what do? You're not supposed to be there, can't move, but what do? Anybody want to take a guess? You turn around and go the way you came in, right? It seems pretty obvious to you. You're like, yeah, I mean, I know that the most certain way to get out is the way that I came in. But that level of reasoning, you had to do some simulation in your head. You had to do some guessing. And this is actually not something that self-driving cars are capable of now and for quite a while. And remember that remote operations center piece? We're going to talk about that a little bit more, because it turns out that this knowledge and expert layers here, AI cannot reason under uncertainty. No AI can. Generative AI cannot reason under uncertainty. Computer vision cannot reason under uncertainty. This AI regresses to the mean. That's great if you need the mean. But in these situations where you need knowledge and expert-based reasoning, driven, and all the uncertainty can come from these places: the environment, rain, snow, sleet, humans, crazy drivers, and this inability of AI to know where its blind spots are. This is going to drive the need for human supervision. Now, I came to tell you what is wrong with academia. What are we doing wrong about? I'm going to give you this all in the context initially of self-driving cars, but when we get towards the end, I'm going to broaden it to all technologies. This is a paper I wrote. You can read it right now on the internet in IEEE Intelligent Vehicles. It's a paper that analyzes all the crashes that happened during the time that I was at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and a little bit after, basically from Q1 of 2022 to Q4 2023. I did not want to put this picture in the paper. It is a picture of crashes per mile between Cruise. At the time, Cruise was still operating. Cruise, Waymo, Zoox, which are considered the top 3 self-driving cars in America. The average rideshare driver, which is the dotted line, and then your average human driver in the US is quite low. So these are the crashes per mile. So over that 2-year period, you can see a lot of oscillation. Waymo is kind of in the band between rideshare and average drivers. The funniest thing about this is the one real lesson that you should learn from this picture is you really got to pay attention if you're in a Lyft and an Uber. They really are having crashes 6 times more often than an average driver. That's a whole different research topic that we should talk about later. But the reason I didn't want to do this, and it's not right, and this is one of the things that I keep telling people, and everyone does this. Waymo does it. And I'm using all crashes. They want to cherry pick their crashes. But the reason that my research is not right, Waymo's research is not right, is because of this thing called transition versus steady state probabilities. When you start doing any kind of statistical test to make sure that you're going to say, okay, you're statistically different from another population, one of the key assumptions that people forget is that you must have a steady state system to be able to make that call. Self-driving is anything but steady state. They're San Francisco, LA, Austin. These are all 3 different distribution types, whether you're driving in sun, at night, in the city, on a highway. Those are all different distributions. And people don't understand that if you try to force this situation, this is why, one of the reasons why RAND says you need to have 275 million miles of driving before you can actually make any statistical assertions, because you must be in steady state to be able to make these kinds of claims. We are very much in transition, the transitional matrices, for those of you who want to think about reasoning that way. And simulation doesn't count. 0. A gazillion simulation miles still equals 0 real miles, right? And so that's another big problem. In the US, all self-driving car companies want to get regulated with simulation results. They don't count because it's so easy. Even if you're not trying, it's relatively easy to make a simulation represent the world in a wrong way. The other reason that this is not a legitimate comparison is that remote operations piece that I told you about. Remote operations is happening 2 ways. Top way is what Waymo is doing. They do remote assist. That means they interpret signs. They have, in the Philippines, they have a giant warehouse of people, and all of those people do is watch all the self-driving cars wherever they are in the world. They'll come up to an intersection, they don't know what to do, and then the human will start to enter in commands. They are not tele-driving, but they are still giving a lot of assistance. And it turns out that and something we learned in remote ops with drones, Philippines can introduce easily a 2-second delay. A 2-second delay, even under remote assist, can be a problem, and Waymo has had a crash with a passenger in the car, a broadside crash because a remote operator got a command in too late. Now, other companies are trying even more scary remote driving. This is actually literally, as you see, the person is driving the car. This is massively related to latencies. Most companies are using the best signal out of 3 cell phone signals, which is a nightmare. That should not be happening, and regulation is, by the way, coming that is going to probably address that. But the reality is that these cars have one or more people attending to them at all times when they're operating. So I would actually tell you that if all of us, as we were driving, had one or more cars watching us and weighing in on what we're doing, we would probably, at least in the US, be a lot better drivers, right? So I think that we need to remember that this comparison between humans and humans and self-driving cars, who's better, who's safer, it is not a legitimate discussion, period. Statistically, we are not in steady state. They have significant remote ops, and Waymo, Zoox, and Cruise is trying to make a comeback. They need to be more transparent about what is happening inside the remote operation centers. The other question that if you haven't thought to yourself is, if every car that's driving needs one remote operator, how is this going to scale? How are we actually going to get real self-driving operation? I mean, if you have somebody remotely, why don't you just have that person in the car? Remote operators cost a lot more than a driver does. So I'm not saying that we're never going to get there, but it's still very much in the developmental stage. So what do we need to do in academia? We have got to remember to go back to the basics. People are missing this. People who think that they know statistics, which is everybody who does machine learning, they think they're gods in statistics, have kind of missed inferential statistics. And some of these core assumptions are you cannot make these claims until you're in a steady state distribution. Now, let me tell you about those crashes. They really happened in 3 categories. Perception crashes, meaning the cars didn't see the world correctly for some way. Then there's planning crashes, meaning the car perceived the world in the right way, but somewhere in that rule knowledge-based reasoning framework, a mistake was made. And last but not least, in this data set, there are occasionally, as new software upgrades come along, safety drivers trial the new software, and they're humans. They get into accidents. And so we're really just going to focus on these left 2 categories. And then, of course, we've got Cruise, Waymo, and Zoox, again, focused on. So let me show you then look at the perception crashes. We can break those down into basically others, which are a few, which, if you really look at this, it's around 10% of crashes are perception other. Far and away, this is a huge result that people need to pay attention to. The primary problem with self-driving cars in their perception systems are phantom braking. They are seeing things that aren't there. Hallucinations. You hear a lot about hallucinations for generative AI. That's BS. That's statistical inferencing errors. These are real hallucinations, meaning the cars are seeing something in the road that isn't there, causing them to slam on their brakes so hard that we get the accordion effect coming in behind. And on the other side, for planning, we have other, again, a small category, because far and away, the biggest problem is something I call unexpected actions by others. And this is where we're on the highest part of that uncertainty curve. All right, I'm going to give you some examples. Cruise, when they are operating in San Francisco, when I say we, who do I really mean? Me and Phil. Because Phil and I are like, we should host a morning show. Morning with AVs. I mean, Phil and I are the commentators. Most articles you see in the U.S. about self-driving cars, they'll talk to Phil, they'll talk to me, and then we get to be counted as the experts. We did not think that this accident was ever going to happen. Why? Because this is a cruise vehicle with LiDAR that has millimeter precision accuracy, hits the back of the bus that's in front of it. We thought, what happened here? How is this possible? This is a great example of how not to engineer a system. What they did is they used the computer vision system as their primary sensor instead of the LiDAR. And the LiDAR was the backup sensor. Now, computer vision systems in the lab have about a 97% accuracy rate. That's the best I've ever seen of any studies. That means 3 out of 100 images are not being seen correctly. In this particular case, you can't really see it in this image. This is an accordion bus with the bendy middle. And they had never trained the computer vision system on this car on the bendy buses. So it didn't know it couldn't recognize this, but it did recognize the front of the bus. And it said, I see the front of the bus. I know the front of the bus is a bus. So I'm just going to draw a line about 40 feet back, and I'm going to consider that to be the end of the bus. So the actual end of the bus was invisible to the computer vision system. Now, it should have called the LiDAR for a second opinion, but if the certainty of the estimate does not drop below some number, it won't call it. And all AI systems are psychopaths. What do I mean by that? They all are extremely confident about what they're doing. AI, neural nets, is a terrible way to estimate a confidence interval. And so this was absolutely certain, 100%, nearly 199.99999% certain that there was nothing in front of it, and then this accident results. Bad engineering. The fact that you would make a computer vision system the primary sensor that's a nightmare. And we're, on Monday, I'm going to be here back in Stockholm talking to the lethal autonomous weapons crowd about the same problem, because the military now wants to put computer vision systems to make these kinds of decisions in war. All right, perception, struck from behind. You heard about the Tesla lawsuit that I was in. Tesla is in this weird category of wanting to call their cars level 2 driving assist, but also kind of at the same time wanting to have self-driving cars. It's not going to work out for them because they only have a computer vision sensor. You just heard me talk about that. Tesla got hung out to dry in the lawsuit that I was the expert witness on. This is in driving assist. When somebody gets hurt with a self-driving car, I can promise you this will be their Achilles heel. They will not survive having a computer vision system be the primary and only reasoning system. In this particular case, this was in the Bay Bridge Tunnel in San Francisco. It was medium traffic, Thanksgiving morning. A Tesla was leading a pack, 65 miles an hour, sees something, we don't know what it is because it's a hallucination, which was nothing, slammed on its brakes so hard, so quickly. That's one of the problems with self-driving cars. They can actuate harder and faster than humans can, so it catches real humans by surprise. 8 other cars piled in behind it. We were lucky that nobody died. People have died in these Tesla crashes. They're under investigation by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I don't know what's ever going to happen to that investigation. Probably going to sit there for years until administrations change. And by the way, all self-driving cars have this problem. They are crashing into people from behind. People are crashing into them from behind at about twice the rate that they should, that we can see from human driving. So this is a clear and present issue, and if we don't get this solved, this is going to be a huge handicap for the self-driving car community. All right, planning. These are the funny ones because, Phil and I were laughing before the talk. The worst thing that ever happened to Waymo is Tesla having a robotaxi, because I personally have been attacked by the Tesla minions, so I know what it's like to have a group of unhinged people come after you. And of course, seeing things like Charlie Kirk shooting, you just never know in America where these crazies are going to come from. But now, because Tesla minions see Waymo as their biggest enemy, now they're putting all these pictures of everything that Waymos do wrong on the internet. They literally have people taking pictures around Austin, LA, San Francisco to show just how bad Waymos are. I do want to be fair to Waymo. They have not killed anybody with their self-driving cars. Tesla cannot say the same thing, not by a long shot, right? But it is kind of interesting because now we get to sit back with popcorn and watch all the accidents unfold or incidents. This is a very recent incident where you can see a a Waymo, I think this one's in Austin, just kind of decides to turn into traffic. Just because. I don't know what happened here. I can make a good guess though. So we have the community in the United States has transitioned from really a pure machine learning approach to computer vision. Now they're trying to do end-to-end learning. And what does that mean? It means instead of training systems, the computer vision system on images, they're actually training them on videos, like entire scenes where not only should you not turn in this situation, but you're trying to develop a whole rule set based on the videos, the actions that are happening in the videos. So, and this is not uncommon to see a car turn into traffic. I mean, this is not sustainable. If the cars keep doing this in any kind of situation, not only will somebody eventually get killed, but, the whole cities are going to start to rebel. And we've seen this before. We've seen San Francisco. I mean, they've lit cars on fire in San Francisco, LA. People are on edge in America. I mean, I don't have to point that out, right? So people are not tolerant of these kinds of behaviors. This was also extremely recent. Waymo's in a lot of trouble about this. You can see that Waymo decided to go, again, in the wrong lane of traffic. This was a wildfire that got out of control in California, and the car just, we don't know, like, why did it decide that it could have the right-of-way on the wrong side of the road? This is one of the problems with end-to-end learning, is that there are no guarantees around performance. All right. Planning unexpected actions by other. Okay, let me go back real quick and say, and remember, these are statistically the lowest numbers of planning problems. One of the biggest problems that we're seeing is this, in planning, is this unexpected actions by others. This is the accident where the pedestrian was hit, the jaywalker was hit in San Francisco. This is the accident that ended Cruz's first round of operations, although now with Sterling Anderson, my former student, he's at VP at GM now. He's trying to bring back the individually owned robotaxi concept at General Motors. But what happened in this particular case, I have written about it, Phil has written about it, everybody's just ad nauseum talked about it. But what's important to remember about this accident is human-driven car here, AV, roll through an intersection, but 9 seconds out, they can see P1, the self-driving car correctly picked up that a jaywalker had entered the street about 9-ish night. It's dark. So 9 seconds before collision, the car knew that it wasn't going to hit her, but it did the estimate and knew that the human car was going to hit her. Now, humans, especially at night, we don't have the depth perception that we have. So in this particular case, the sensors probably were superhuman in that case to be able to detect all this. So what did the AV do once it detected all that? It's America. It sped up, closing the gap, right? And as happened, she went in front of the car, the Waymo, that had sped up, was hit, but kind of on her side. She's jaywalking, and it hits, and it throws her into the path of the self-driving car. Correctly detects her, slams on its brakes, hits her, but not too bad. She probably would have walked away if that had been the end of it. But she's under the front of the car. AI doesn't know anything. It doesn't really reason. It just does it mimics reasoning. It's like a object impermanence issue with children, out of sight, out of mind. She's under the undercarriage of the car. It doesn't see her. And it thinks, okay, well, she's gone. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to pull over. I know I've had an accident. I need to pull over. She gets caught up under the undercarriage. And that's her right there under the back left tire. She was in the hospital for about a year. She lived. There was never a lawsuit on this one because I'm quite sure that they settled handily very quickly with her. But this led to the pulling of their permits from the state of California for many reasons. There was a bit of a cover-up. That's not of interest to me today. But what I will tell you is clearly, with no imagination, there was a failure of the car to reason through this situation. At the very minimum, if it hadn't accelerated into the intersection, this would have been much better. But there was a remote operations team. But Cruz in its attempt to save money, they had proposed that there was a remote operation team with the big red button to stop the cars that they were supervising. But in a cost-saving measure, they took that out of the actual design, and the remote operators did actually see and hear this, except it was on a 3-second delay, so they didn't get to see it and hear it in real time. But even if they had, they couldn't have stopped it because there was no emergency stop button, which had been originally proposed by Cruise. So the remote operations piece is going to become critical as we're moving forward because, again, cars can't think. They don't reason under real uncertainty. And so that's really going to open up the door to bigger problems. Now, I've given you all these examples. Let me break it down and tell you what we're really seeing here is, I've told you that uncertainty is key. But there are two kinds of uncertainty when we speak about this in academic terms. It's epistemic, which is basically what do we know? How do we build models? What is the knowledge that we put in models? Meaning that this case right here, we know that you should never make computer vision a primary sensor. This is a failure of epistemic uncertainty. We had the knowledge, we just didn't do it correctly. Aleatory uncertainty is a little bit trickier. This is the uncertainty that just comes with statistical processes. It's a stochastic source of randomness, right? So we're not 100% sure what to do with aleatory uncertainty. We know it exists. And while we may not be able to control it exactly, we should at least be able to estimate where it's likely to happen. I see that in academia, we're not doing enough on either of these points. We talk a lot in very abstract terms. You'll see some people talking about, I did this and that with epistemic uncertainty in very vague terms. But we need to start making this real. We need to start bringing in uncertainty management to all sorts of disciplines in a more formal way and also applied way so that people can understand. These all happened because of sources of uncertainty that were uncontrolled. But especially if it's shameful. We know what causes epistemic uncertainty. We know that a wildfire, is that likely in California? Absolutely. So if we know that there are these sources of uncertainty that can cause problems in the behavior of these vehicles, we should absolutely be doing something about it. So that leads me to my last slide, where I'm going to rant about the rest of the world when it comes to artificial intelligence tests and evaluation. First, I want to say, let me just go back. The reason that the papers that are coming out about uncertainty management are vague, and oftentimes you just like, I don't understand, where's this author going with this? Academia, at least in the US, is shameful for not wanting to publish negative results. What does that mean? I have a really hard time with papers that show that technologies don't work. No one wants to publish that. I have this paper about generative AI and path planning. People do not want to publish it because it shows just how ludicrous this generative AI is for these kinds of tasks. People do not want to admit that these problems exist, because if we admit that these problems exist, then somehow I'm not going to get the research funding that I need. And by the way, it's bad in the US right now. I've lost all my research funding. Most everybody I know has lost their research funding. Unless you're doing something like generative AI definitely belongs in weapons, then you're going to get money to do funding. So this is a big problem. We don't want to do the research because it's not popular. We don't want to publish it because we don't want to admit that the technologies that we're promoting actually have serious problems. And when I say serious, I mean really serious. So I developed this rubric to start thinking about, how do you know when you're in that region? Like I've showed you the uncertainty curve and the reasoning, But where does my technology fit in terms of safety? So on the y-axis, I've got low safety criticality to high, and on the x, determinism versus non-determinism, right? So this is where you're going to get anything with a neural net is going to be non-deterministic, but there's degrees of non-determinism. And what you see is that where we really have to pay attention is this triangle in the upper right that goes from, deterministic path planning is in all aircraft. It's in your car too, but I mean, there have been a few people killed because they followed a bad Waze or Google Maps suggestion, but the numbers are quite low. It's quite rare. But you could imagine, and we have seen this, when aircraft go wrong, when pilots don't understand the limits of their path planners, this could be safety critical. But, things have gotten a lot better in the last 20 years. So there is that's the beginning of determinism, but it slides all the way down to what you see at the upper right. I would actually say the one I'm going to show at the CIPRI on Monday, lethal autonomous weapons is really in the upper, that's the most, right? Putting non-deterministic technologies into a weapon that's making its own decisions about how to kill is the worst possible idea. I'm not saying always, but certainly under the constraints that we have of technologies at this time. And that's primarily because of the computer vision problem. Computer vision is that bad. People want to use it in surgery, in cars, in planes, in weapons, in Teslas. Never going to happen. Tesla is never going to be a self-driving car, an effective self-driving car, because it sits in this upper right of uncertainty. We don't know how to manage it. We're not doing the research because nobody will publish it. So we're going to be parked in that upper right corner with computer vision. Now, one of the things I want you to see is just beneath that. This is in my county in America. They're trying to turn over 911, which I understand here is 112. You call, and a chatbot powered by OpenAI is going to decide how to triage your call. That is a nightmare. I can't believe it. In the county that I live in, and of course I'm jumping up and down trying to change that. I mean, this is the worst possible case. That is where you absolutely you cannot afford to make a mistake. Will it get it right most of the time? Maybe. But even if it only has a 15% failure rate, that's 15% is a big number. Beneath that, I've seen that in Sweden. I've seen people doing these papers. This is big in Europe right now. We're going to use LLMs to do medical transcription. I'm sorry I can't be an expert witness in Europe. I just don't have the time. I'd love to. I'd love to just stick it to all of you guys and the companies that are doing this, because that is a bad idea. We know that the error rates, OpenAI even admits that in transcription, 37% error rate. They've admitted to that. It's actually much higher than that. The fact that people think that it's okay to put any kind of neural net that's doing basically regression to the mean, meaning it's going to go for the most frequent outcome, and you want to put that in a safety critical path, you're insane. Now, let me just step back bigger and say, and what's wrong with this picture? Look, companies are going to do what companies are going to do. They're going to cut corners. They're going to try to sell you a technology that doesn't work correctly. We in academia, more so in America as opposed to here, we are not doing enough for test and evaluation. We do not have classes on this. We do not encourage people to do it in papers. We encourage people to do demonstrations and superficial simulations to show that their algorithms, systems, whatever, work. We don't require any sort of repeatability. We don't require any clear statement of limitations where your assumption's falling apart. And so what I'm showing over here is this. In America, this is how we think about technologies. Here's basic research at what we call technology readiness level 1. And technology readiness level 9 is where you put a product in development. supposedly academia stays right here from 1 through 3. And that's what they'll say is like, we shouldn't do testing. In fact, National Science Foundation told me to my face, safety is not a real field of study. That is a problem. When a major funding agency does not recognize that safety, particularly safety of non-deterministic systems that hallucinate like crazy, trying to manage that, I just proposed a big program to the military about trying to develop technology to at least estimate the likelihood of when you're going to have a hallucination. They told me hallucinations are solved. That's not a problem. So this is a huge deal. We think that we should only stay down here, that we don't have to teach testing. It's not in our value structure, yet Tesla just got a $243 million award. One of the reasons I have to turn down a lot of the legal cases that people bring to me, but I take the high priority ones because I'll tell you what I've done. I am sick and tired of people telling me hallucinations are solved, computer vision is awesome. So if nobody's going to listen to me and they're not going to publish my papers, I'm going to go after them in court and I'm going to take their money. Because that is what changes things in America. Because when the $243 million judgment came against Tesla, people noticed. And it's sad that that's what it took for people to realize that maybe there's a problem with the computer vision system. But I feel like we get a few more of these big awards under my belt, and industry will start to change. But it would be better, that's one of the reasons I come to these conferences, instead of me trying to go against the big guys in some kind of, I forget her name, she's famous in America for standing up for safety, or like a Ralph Nader. I shouldn't have to do that. What I'd rather do is bring us together as a community to really start formalizing what does safety research look like? How does it fit in with artificial intelligence? We have never needed safety research more than we need it right now, especially because of this non-determinism question. It's huge. This can be everything I've proposed here. It's enough work for this whole room for the next 10 years. But we need to appreciate it. I feel like I'm speaking to the choir in Europe, but working together, coming together, having these kinds of conferences. I'm trying to start something similar to this one in the US. Hopefully you'll see it next year. But we definitely need to come together and link arms and then start to push for the publications of negative results, because that's how safety is seen. Maybe we need to start working on that messages, but that is how we're going to have to address this. Not me individually, not Phil. Phil and I can only do so much, right? So we need to come together as a community, and I'm begging you to join me in this battle. All right, let's take some questions.